Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our Bhagavad-gita Satsang. I'm Hari-kirtana, and as always, it's a great pleasure for me to be here with you, an honor to have you here with me. And I trust, all right, no, actually I don't trust that you can hear me. That's why every single time I ask you to raise your hand to let me know that you can hear me. So please, those of you who are here, thank you so very much. It is nice to see you all. And now I feel like I can be heard with confidence. Therefore, we can proceed to take care of our usual bit of housekeeping. So for those of you who are new to the satsang, you can adjust your audio settings and your viewing options up in the right-hand corner. You need not worry about your microphone or video camera because I cannot see or hear you, even though you can see, presumably, and hear, for sure, me. If you would like to make yourself heard, please type a comment or a question either into the chat box or the Q&A box as you wish. I have them both open, and we'll keep my eye on them throughout the duration of our proceedings. Our last class, we began chapter 12, the Yoga of Devotion, Bhakti Yoga, and Arjuna begins with a question about which position is higher, the position held by the yogi who is engaged in a personal relationship with the Supreme Person, or the yogi who engages in worship of Brahman or meditation on the absolute unity of being with the objective of realizing oneness with ultimate spiritual reality. So we spoke a little bit about the two different principles involved in the two different methods of yoga associated with each of these paths, and how Krishna is the swift deliverer from the cycle of birth and death for one who approaches him. This evening, we will look at lists. Krishna will give us his opinion as to how to assess where you're at on the path of yoga and which is the right point of entry for you. There's a way for everyone to get in on the yoga action. So no matter where you are, you can start from where you are. And Krishna will speak about the different ways that one can engage in yoga from wherever one is at. He will also exercise some judgment. That is to say, he will offer an opinion as to which is better than what, and therefore the sense of a progression from a starting point to an end point. So that's what we're going to talk about this evening. We're going to cover verses 8 through 12, and this is a relatively short chapter of the Bhagavad-gita, so we're going to finish the chapter with a cluster of verses that Krishna will close with to describe one whom he feels great affection toward. So that's going to be next week. So before we move on to our verses for this evening, we will chant call and response, our invocation mantra. I chant, you chant back. For those of you who are new to transliterated Sanskrit, Sanskrit written in the Roman alphabet with diacritical marks indicating pronunciation cues, the dot over the M indicates that we bring the back of our tongue up against the back of the roof of our mouth at the same time that we bring our lips together in front. The bars across the A's or any vowel indicates an elongated and open sound for that vowel as opposed to without a bar, in which case we get a shorter, more staccato version of that vowel. So with that, I will chant And if you like, you can chant back. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Translation: I offer my respects to the Supreme Person, the Son of Vasudeva, who is the all-pervading transcendence. Last week, we left off with two verses together, verses 6 and 7. So Krishna is speaking to Arjuna in response to his question at the very beginning of the chapter. Krishna says, "But for those who worship me, who completely release all their activities to me, who are unequivocal in their devotion to me, who worship me and meditate on me by this practice of yoga alone, O son of Pritha, I swiftly lift them from the ocean of repeated birth and death, for their consciousness is absorbed in me." So, what's interesting here is how Krishna has established Bhakti Yoga as a standalone practice capable of lifting the practitioner to the ultimate goal of yoga, or to be more precise, capable of positioning the practitioner in such a way as to be lifted to the ultimate goal of yoga. And that gets back to our analysis of the two different principles of yoga, where one reaches the ultimate goal or attempts to reach the ultimate goal by one's own endeavor, as opposed to reaching the ultimate goal with help from that very ultimate goal, the person, Bhagavan Krishna. In all of the other paths of yoga that we have discussed and explored in the Bhagavad-gita, the essential ingredient has always been bhakti, devotion. That's the thing that brings it to its fulfillment, that really makes it work. And yet here we see bhakti yoga as a standalone. In other words, the other activities of the other paths of yoga are either automatically performed or their goal is automatically included. So whether one is engaging in karma yoga or ashtanga yoga or jnana yoga, bhakti has to be there in order for them to truly reach the ultimate goal, or bhakti yoga by itself subsumes karma yoga, ashtanga yoga, and jnana yoga, the yoga of action, the yoga of meditation, and the yoga of knowledge. Because the goal is automatically reached. That is to say, the goal of all of the three other systems is reached directly through bhakti. So the meaning of this verse, the takeaway from this verse, is that one need not, certainly should not engage in just plain karma. That is to say, action that brings about a reaction on account of our attachment to enjoying the results of our actions. Nor should one try to cultivate knowledge by the process of mental speculation, on your own guessing what is true and what is not. But rather, one is recommended here to engage in the process of devotional yoga and therefore automatically developing a kind of detachment from the desire to enjoy the fruits of one's activities and the inclination to defer to authorities, I should say, on the process of how to approach and ultimately attain the ultimate goal, rather than making stuff up or guessing or otherwise trying to reason one's way toward the ultimate goal. So, all the benefits of other yogic processes, such as study of the Vedas or study of transcendental knowledge, ritualistic religiosity, offering sacrifices, giving charity, etc. All of that gets covered under the umbrella of bhakti yoga or devotional service. So as we go through Krishna's list this evening, we'll see a little bit more about how that is the case. But the specific good fortune that is acquired by the bhakti yogi is the good fortune of having everything covered simply by the practice of devotional yoga. All right, so tonight we're going to cover verses 8 through 12, wherein Krishna will introduce different stages of devotional practice, and he's going to do it in reverse order, which is kind of curious. And then he's going to describe the attributes that one develops from such practices. So I will go through the translation for each verse, and then we will come back and look at each verse in detail. So we begin with verse 8 of chapter 12. Krishna continues. Fix your mind on me alone. Invest your intelligence in me. Thus, you will always live in me alone. Of this, there is no doubt. Text number 9. O winner of wealth, if you cannot fix your mind on me without deviation, then develop a desire to attain me through a steady practice of yoga. Text number 10. Even if you are unable to engage in such a practice, just try to become devoted to me through action. By offering your actions to me, you will surely achieve perfection. Verse 11. But if even this is not possible for you, then remain self-situated under the shelter of my yoga and try to relinquish the fruits of your actions. And text number 12. The cultivation of knowledge is better than practice. Meditation is better than knowledge, and renunciation of the fruits of action is better than meditation, for by renunciation one can attain peace of mind. Now, we're going to look at an alternative translation of that last verse. This verse number 12 is, at least for me, one of the most challenging. And there are a few different angles on, a few different ways it's translated, and a couple of different ways you can look at it. And that's part of what I think makes it a challenging verse. So we'll take a little extra time to look at that one. Meanwhile, let's go back to verse number 8. Fix your mind on me alone. So Krishna has already established that he is the ultimate object of meditation, and knowledge. And he's going to reiterate this in the 15th chapter when he tells us that by all the Vedas, it is he who is to be known. So the purpose of studying the Vedas or Vedanta is to know and understand Krishna, according to Krishna. So here he's repeating that this is the topmost platform, to have one's mind always focused, always directed towards Krishna. Then invest your intelligence in me. So intelligence translates the word buddhi in this verse, which means spiritual reason, or reason based on spiritual understanding. Intelligence is a material energy. We just discussed earlier how there are 8 material elements, 5 gross physical material elements, and then 3 other metaphysical material elements. So the 5 physical elements: earth, water, fire, air, and ether, solids, liquids, radiant energy, gases, and space in modern parlance. And then mind, intelligence, and ego. And Krishna describes these as divine energies that are composed of the 3 qualities of material nature: goodness, passion, and ignorance. So buddhi, spiritually directed intelligence, is intelligence that, for starters, is situated in this higher mode of goodness. And because it's Krishna's energy, even though we think it's our intelligence, it's actually not something we created. It's something that we were given. When we invest that energy back into the source of that energy, it's kind of like if you have a business and it generates some revenue, and you take that revenue and you invest it, reinvest it back in the business to grow your business. Business grows, and if all goes well, then you get the return on that investment, and you take that return and you reinvest it back in the business, and so on, and it keeps growing. So it's the same principle that when we invest our energies back into the source of those energies, then the return on investment grows. So that's a way to think about this. The other thing is that our intelligence is inclined to calculate so many different things, to make distinctions between this thing and that thing, and whether this is good or that is bad, et cetera, et cetera. So when we invest this capacity for discernment, analysis, in trying to understand Krishna, seeing how Krishna is everywhere, seeing how Krishna's energies are working, trying to understand how Krishna is present through his energies on a personal level, trying to ascertain how Krishna is an active factor in our own lives. There's a lot of different ways that we can engage our intelligence, direct our intelligence, invest our intelligence in Krishna. Svadhyaya, study of the self, study of yoga wisdom texts. Well, if the ultimate object of knowledge being given to us in Yoga Wisdom texts is Krishna, then by studying Yoga Wisdom texts, we are investing our intellect in the greater project of understanding Krishna. Anyway, so there's a few different ways to think about this idea of invest your intelligence in me. Thus you will always live in me alone. Of this there is no doubt. So this is kind of an interesting way to put it. To live in Krishna. Well, in one sense, we're already doing that. If Krishna is present by his energies, we're moving through the world. Krishna is, in at least one sense, not different from his energies, then we're moving through Krishna all the time. There's nothing outside of Krishna, therefore we have to be already living in Krishna. But there's a very big difference between living in Krishna consciously and living in Krishna oblivious to the fact that that's actually what is happening. So to abide in Krishna means to be aware of one's position as an infinitesimal part of the infinite complete whole, as opposed to being in a state of illusion to the effect that we have some independent existence from the complete whole. So tell me what this phrase means to you. You will always live in me alone. What does that conjure up for you? If you have any comments about this, if you have any thoughts about how you understand this phrase, please share them with me in the chat, share them with everyone else. I'd be curious to know, since that is such an interesting turn of phrase and an interesting way to think about our relationship with Krishna as infinitesimal parts of an infinite complete whole. And while I wait anxiously for your comments or any questions that you have about this particular verse, I will move to our next verse, which is the verse we're going to chant together tonight. So for those of you who have looked at the Sanskrit and the Yoga-sutras of Patanjali, you may find some familiar words here. So a few notes about the pronunciation before we chant the verse. We pronounce every letter that we see in the transliterated Sanskrit. So when we see two T's, we're going to hit the first T, slam on the brakes, and then take off from the second T. So both T's get pronounced as opposed to merged together, as is so often the case in American English. An accent mark over an S indicates a pink noise back of the mouth SH sound, as opposed to a higher pitched white noise SH sound, sh. That comes about when we see the dot under the S. So two different SH sounds and then a regular S sound when we see an S without any diacritical mark. And the tilde over an N indicates a nya sound. So the flat of one's tongue against the center or center rear, about a third of the way forward in the roof of your mouth, nya. That's our N with a tilde. Without a tilde or any other mark, it is a regular N sound. So with that, I will chant each line. You chant each line back. Here we go. Atta chittam samadhatum na shaknoshi mayi sthiram abhyasa yogena tato Mam ichchaptum dhananjaya. Okay, so I missed one. The C in transliterated Sanskrit is always a CH sound, and when you see a CH, you put some additional air after the CH sound because we pronounce every letter that we see in the transliterated Sanskrit. Therefore, the second word of the last line is ichchaptum. So we'll do this one more time. But before we do, well, let's do this one more time. Then I'm going to get to your questions and comments. Thank you very much for popping those in there. So here we go. One line at a time. I chant, you chant back. Attachittam samadhatum na shaknoshi mayi sthiram abhyasa yogena tato mam ichchaptum dhananjaya. Translation. O winner of wealth, if you cannot fix your mind on me without deviation, then develop a desire to attain me through a steady practice of yoga. All right. So the desire to abide in Krishna is what Krishna is encouraging, because we might not already have that desire or the capacity to simply fix our minds in a state of samadhi, of unbroken meditation on Krishna. We might not be able to just do that all the time. That's a very advanced stage of bhakti yoga. So these popped up in the Q&A rather than the chat, so I will share these with you. Jess offers that to abide in Krishna, to me, it sounds almost like marriage, to live connected to another person. Here, a very special, categorically different person, and to live in surrender to that person, Krishna. Very nice. Yeah, that's a very nice way to think about that. And then from Kevin, it makes me think about how one of the mystical Christian traditions express what is perhaps a similar concept: we live in Christ. Yeah, in Christos. Yeah, that concept is there. Now, I wasn't raised in the Christian tradition, but I do read a fair amount of contemplative Christian writing, and also some Christian writing associated with healing the body and spirit. So I do hear this phrase, that we live in Christ. And now I feel a little motivated to do a little extra digging on that, just to make sure that I'm as familiar as I can be with that idea. So thank you very much for inspiring me with that. I'm going to follow up on this. Thank you very much. One of the great things about the Bhagavad-gita is that it is a non-sectarian science of universal religious principles. That is to say, principles that bring us close to the Supreme Person, to the Supreme Being. And therefore, they can be applied in practically any form of faith. And we will see very, very similar ideas often enough that show up in other faith forms. So this is a very nice example. All right. So now with this verse, if you cannot fix your mind on me without deviation, develop a desire to attain me through the practice of yoga. So in the previous verse, there's the idea that one's mind flows constantly in Krishna's direction. One's intelligence flows constantly in Krishna's direction. And therefore, the assumption is that we, in our practice, want to cultivate a desire to do this. And there's a very nice prayer offered by Queen Kunti, Arjuna's mother, who is also Krishna's aunt. And after the battle is over, Krishna will get ready to leave. His work is done. His mission to assist Arjuna and his brothers in reestablishing the principles of Dharma, the universal non-sectarian principles of religion, is complete. So now he's getting ready to go. And Arjuna's mother runs to him before he actually has a chance to leave and offers a very wonderful set of prayers. So this is an illustration of this exchange between the mother of the Pandavas, Kunti Devi, and Krishna as he is preparing to return to his own city. One verse from her wonderful prayers, all of which together express the mood of the highest level of devotional yoga, goes like this. O Lord of Madhu, as the Ganges forever flows to the sea without hindrance, let my attraction be constantly drawn unto you without being diverted to anyone else. So this is an extraordinary request that Kunti is making, insofar as she is a queen, for one thing, so she has a queen's social life, but also she has a family, her sons, the Pandavas, and many other relatives, and yet here she's asking that she receive a blessing from the Lord of Madhu. So Madhu means honey. And Krishna is considered to be the Lord of honey for a few reasons. For one thing, he used to steal the neighbor's honey as a child. And so he has names associated with his mischievous nature of stealing yogurt and honey and such like that. But also because, as we've discussed earlier, Krishna's form facilitates a relationship of love that is very, very sweet. His beautiful form inspires feelings that are associated with the idea of sweetness. And here Kunti Devi is addressing Krishna as the Lord of sweetness, the Lord of honey, the source of all sweetness, the one from whom sweetness flows. And her request, as effortlessly as a river, particularly the Ganges River, which flows very swiftly to the sea, nothing stops it. Let my attraction be constantly drawn to you without being diverted to anything else. So the underlying assumption in this verse is that our yoga practice, and especially a devotional yoga practice, is meant to help us develop a desire to attain Krishna, or to fix our mind on Krishna, to let our mind flow to Krishna. And this is actually part of our natural state. Remember, self-realization means to experience ourselves in our true nature. Krishna means all attractive. We are infinitesimal parts of an infinite complete whole, and the summum bonum, the ultimate form of that complete absolute truth is Krishna. Therefore, it makes perfect sense that in our natural condition, we flow effortlessly in the direction of the center of the source of our being. So to develop this desire, to be situated in our true nature and thus to flow effortlessly toward the center of the true, of the absolute reality. That's what Krishna is suggesting that we do. And speaking for myself, I know that I am not in a constant state of samadhi. My mind is not constantly flowing towards Krishna. I try to engage my intellect in Krishna. One of the reasons that I am giving these classes is because it gives me, well, not just an opportunity, an obligation to prepare for these classes and therefore invest my intellect in these teachings about Krishna. So my hope is that by this practice, some genuine desire will come about. So in this verse, Krishna addresses Arjuna as a winner of wealth. So this indicates that Arjuna will gain both material and spiritual wealth by fighting. He'll win the battle and therefore win the kingdom, but also because it is Krishna's desire that this battle go forward, and as we saw in the 11th chapter, that by his arrangement, it's already pretty much a done deal, Arjuna will obtain the ultimate wealth, which is Krishna himself, who is the possessor of wealth. We hear Shri Bhagavan Uvacha before Krishna speaks. Whenever he speaks in the Bhagavad-gita, Bhagavan is a word that, among other things, means one who possesses all opulences in completeness, meaning that he is the possessor of all wealth, or he is blessed with all wealth. Remember, it's not Bhagavan Uvacha, but Shri Bhagavan Uvacha, which in addition to being an honorific, is also an indication of the presence of the goddess of fortune. So Krishna is blessed by the goddess of fortune, and therefore is the possessor of all wealth. In a sense, he is also the possessor of the goddess of fortune. So that's the significance of this phrase, winner of wealth, when Krishna applies it to Arjuna. So here are some words that may be familiar to you from the Yoga-sutras. For starters, the word ata, if, therefore, now, is how sutras begin, all sutras, not just the Yoga-sutras. Chittam, usually translated as the mind, also understood to be the combination of the three metaphysical elements, mind, intelligence, and ego combined together. The field of mental activity is another way to think of chittam. And samadhatum, samadhi, is the word hiding in that, indicating to fix or to be focused on, the perfection of meditation. The word stiram also shows up in this verse, steadily. So our yoga practice is described, or asana practice specifically is described in the second sutra, the second pada rather, of the Patanjali's Yoga-sutras, Sutra 46, Sthira Sukham Asanam. Posture should be steady and comfortable. So sthira means both balanced, but it also means uninterrupted. That is to say, once you take your seat, you don't get up for a long time. You stay fixed in your practice, and then you come back to your seat over and over and over again. And then abhyasa yogena, by the practice of yoga. So Krishna referred to abhyasa yoga back in the 6th chapter when he was speaking very specifically about Patanjali's yoga system, Ashtanga Yoga, the Eightfold Path of Mystic Yoga, wherein he uses abhyasa and vairagya, which is another word, renunciation or appropriate renunciation, that shows up in the Yoga-sutras. So the translation of that verse is, the Blessed Lord said, "O mighty armed one, the restless mind is undoubtedly difficult to control. However, O son of Kunti, such control can be achieved by suitable practice and by detachment." So even back in this chapter, he's admitted that the highest platform of yogic meditation, wherein one's mind is completely and uninterruptedly, undeviatingly fixed on him, is difficult, but it takes some practice. And now in this verse, he is suggesting that, if you are not already in a state of samadhi, then you develop the desire to attain that state of samadhi by steady yoga practice. Or another way to think about this is practice that goes hand in hand with detachment from material or other objectives. In other words, exclusive focus on spiritual objectives. And what that indicates is yoga as a systematic process for developing an attraction to Krishna. This is called sadhana bhakti, practice of bhakti, or also known as vaidhi bhakti, practice in accordance with regulative principles prescribed by one's guru with the intention of achieving spontaneous attraction, or the spontaneous flow of the mind towards Krishna. In Sanskrit, that's called raganuga bhakti. So, by developing a steady, regular, and regulated practice of, for example, rising early in the morning to practice meditation, setting up a sacred space, and in this case, making Krishna the center of your sacred space, if you were going to take Krishna literally, or if that's the form of faith that inspires your proximity or desire for proximity to the Supreme Person. You might set up a sacred space and then offer fresh flowers or incense, prepare and offer the food that you prepare before you consume it yourself. There are practices such as this, and in order to maintain that steady practice, ethical restraints and purificatory observances, yamas and niyamas, are also part of the system. And in Patanjali's system, he begins with these ethical imperatives and personal observances that are really meant to purify the consciousness so that these other practices have a firm foundation and we receive the full effect. Just as when we receive the full effect of nourishment from our food when our digestive system is clean. That's one way to put it. Our car, let's say all the stuff that delivers gasoline to the engine, if that's all gunked up, the engine isn't going to get the full effect of the flow of gasoline. So these yamas and niyamas, these regulative principles of yoga, are meant to purify our spiritual system in a way that enables us to fully experience the effects of all of our other spiritual practices. So this is what Krishna is referring to when he speaks about the practice of yoga. Now, the practices in the previous two verses are primarily internal practices having to do with a meditative yoga practice. In the next couple of verses, he's going to refer to external practices. And if you have any questions, once again, pop them into the Q&A box or into the chat box and let me know any questions or comments about what I've said so far. Our next verse, verse number 10. Even if you are unable to engage in such a practice, just try to become devoted to me through action. By offering your actions to me, you will surely achieve perfection. So this is cultivating a devotional sensibility through action or karma yoga. And the kind of karma yoga that Krishna is referring to in this verse is technically called niskama karma yoga, or action without attachment to either the results of the actions or, for that matter, the kind of action that's being performed. It's action that's also informed by bhakti, or the knowledge of the desirability of having devotional feelings. So action informed by transcendental knowledge, where the actor understands that the objective is to cultivate a devotional consciousness with the hope of attaining perfection by grace. So this kind of karma yoga is so powerful that even if you don't gain control over your mind, you can still attain perfection by grace. Then our 11th verse, but if even this is not possible for you, then remain self-situated under the shelter of my yoga and try to relinquish the fruits of your actions. So now this is another step back, referring now to the lower level of karma yoga called sakarma yoga, which means you give up the fruits of your action. Whatever you earn from your acts, you give up or offer as a sacrifice some part of what you get. Well, you're still attached to the kind of action you perform. So this is good news for me because I still have plenty of attachments to the kind of work that I do. But I am able to give some portion of the proceeds from the work that I do to causes that are connected to Krishna's desires or Krishna's way of being, or the goal of helping people come closer to Krishna. So for example, when I prepare for this class, I'm looking at a website called Vedabase, which gives me access to a very wonderful edition of the Bhagavad-gita, plus an online edition of the Srimad Bhagavatam behind me, so I don't have to rustle through my books. I can look up things online. And because I use it so much, I give a regular donation every month to support the work of this website, keep it maintained and updated. If you go to my website, at the bottom of my homepage, you'll also see that there are a couple of causes that I donate to. And if you feel so inspired, please join me in donating to these two very nice causes. One is a school for young girls in Vrindavan, Uttar Pradesh, India, called the Sandipani Muni School. These are girls who otherwise would be living in a very poverty-stricken condition, and odds are not getting any kind of education, being possible married off very, very early in their lives. This is a nice thing, and this takes place in Krishna's hometown. There's also some devotees of Krishna who run a cow sanctuary down in Florida, and I try to do something to support the very nice work that they do as well. My point in mentioning these things is look for opportunities to become involved in supporting the work of others who are engaged in some kind of devotional service, some action that they're taking in order to help bring others closer to Krishna. And that's one way to relinquish the fruits of your actions. Other than that, it is simply a matter of developing piety by doing good works. So even if one is engaged in material welfare work, simply by helping others, by taking whatever good fortune you have and taking what you can give beyond what you need for yourself to live a comfortable, peaceful life. And using those resources for the betterment of others. That develops a sense of elevation of consciousness as well, without which one cannot really build a platform for making spiritual advancement. If one is taking all of one's earnings and simply engaging in personal or selfish indulgences, then it's very difficult to make advancement in spiritual life. Now, I'm not saying that you should never go on vacation, you should be a miser and live a very restrained, artificially restrained life and feel bad about not doing more to give money to others. That's not my point here. We all have to live peacefully. We all have our own needs for maintenance and material comfort. So, and it's very difficult in this world, in this particular time and place that we live in, to do that. So the idea here is to look for opportunities to share one's wealth in such a way as to better the lives of others. And in particular, if one is able to identify a person engaged in devotional service to Krishna who's helping others come closer to Krishna, then that's also a very good way to spiritualize the renunciation of the fruits of one's actions. And then we go back up the ladder. So that's what we're going to do in our last verse, 12. The cultivation of knowledge is better than practice. Meditation is better than knowledge. Renunciation of the fruits of action is better than meditation, for by renunciation, one can attain peace of mind. Now, this is the verse where I said I wanted to look at an alternative translation for part of the verse. Another way that I have seen this verse translated is, if you cannot take to this practice, then engage yourself in the cultivation of knowledge. So that kind of puts it in reverse. So this can be a challenging verse to understand. So I looked at a few different commentaries from the Vaishnava acharyas, or teachers, historical teachers. And so here's what I got from Madhva, from his particular line. And Kevin, I got your question, so I'm going to come back to it in just a second. So just to let you know I got you. All right. So Madhva tells us that knowledge is superior to the performance of any activity without knowledge, specifically without spiritual knowledge. And better still is meditation. Best kind of meditation is meditation informed by divine knowledge rather than by ordinary knowledge. So meditation associated with divine knowledge results in spiritual experience and subsequently supreme peace and detachment from material engagements. Or in other words, rather than trying to cultivate detachment from the fruits of our actions, that detachment shows up automatically as a function of meditation informed by spiritual knowledge. And therefore, from that position of peacefulness that comes about due to such meditation, the desire for material stuff just sort of disappears all by itself. So that's kind of an interesting way to put renunciation of actions all the way at the other end of the spectrum, because now we're thinking about it as a function or an adjunct of meditation. Then, looking at Ramanuja's commentary, he offers us the following. If after prolonged practice and attempts, self-realization does not arise because of a lack of inner spiritual development or due to an unstable mind that's easily distracted or because of some weakness in controlling the senses, then one should adopt contemplation and reflection as delineated all the way back in chapter 2. Or in other words, knowledge means knowledge of the distinction between matter and spirit, between the soul and the body. So that is what we refer to as a baseline for buddhi, or spiritually informed intelligence. So even if it's difficult to execute with regularity the practices, the regulative practices of sadhana bhakti, one should still perform activities that please the Supreme Lord and renounce the desire for rewards associated with that. So that is kind of a summation of this reverse list of, if you can't do this, do that. If you can't do that, do this. And then Krishna goes back the other way, or almost in a circular way of, this is better than that, that's better than this is better than that. Hence, you arrive at the ultimate goal from any of these starting points. All right, so question. I'm trying to get a better understanding about the difference between verse 10 and 11. And verse 10 says, to work for me, this is similar to working on the cow sanctuary versus donating to the cow sanctuary, which would be an example of verse 11, giving up the results of work. Okay, so this is a good question, Kevin. Thank you very much. So let's go back quickly. Verse 10 is, even if you are unable to engage in the regulated practice of yoga, just try to become devoted to me through action. By offering your actions to me, you will surely achieve perfection. So I think you're actually on the right track here. Here, the actions themselves are what's being offered. Whereas in the 11th verse, if that's not possible, then remain self-situated, which means whatever is your occupation, whatever you're already doing, just do that. With a sense of being in the shelter of my yoga, understanding that even if you don't leave your job to do some other thing, whatever it is you're doing, know that you're still situated within the shelter of my yoga by just relinquishing the fruits of your actions. So, in other words, in verse 10, the action itself is what's offered. In verse 11, I do whatever it is I do, but I offer the result. Does that make a clear distinction between the action, offering the action itself and then offering the results of the action? The first one, 10, is considered superior because both the action and the result are being offered, whereas in 11, the action is just what you ordinarily do, but the result of that, or some part thereof, is what's being offered. And that's the difference between niskama karma yoga and sakarma karma yoga. Niskama karma yoga is karma yoga without any attachment, and sakarma karma yoga is karma yoga with attachment, but with offering the results of action. Anyway, let me know. Good. All right. You're very welcome. My pleasure. And that takes us to the end of tonight's class. So, our quick recap. We covered Krishna's reverse list of here's the best thing, but if you can't do that, do the next best thing. And if you can't do that, do the next best thing, et cetera, et cetera. And that's good news for us, particularly good news for me, because this way I know that I can orient myself toward the ultimate goal and have faith that I am under the shelter of Krishna's yoga while I attempt to cultivate a desire to direct my mind in Krishna's direction. We have a sense of which is better than what, and therefore we can take the next step. We can just think about, where am I at now, realistically? Where am I? What's the next step? What can I do from where I'm at in order to make progress? Knowing that wherever we're at, we're in a position where we can make spiritual progress. Now, I was planning on going further, but rather than just dipping into characteristics of one who is dear to Krishna, I'm going to save the entire group of verses where Krishna will describe those characteristics for our next class, and that's how we're going to finish out the chapter. Are there any other questions from those of you who are here with me live? I would be happy to take those questions. Julie, thank you very much for letting me know that that was helpful. For those of you who are not here, or at least in real time for our webinar this evening, any questions that you have, I would be happy to receive at hari@hari-kirtana.com. I'm always very, very happy to hear from you. And if you go to my website, hari-kirtana.com, aside from the recordings page, you can also visit the pages of some of these very nice organizations that I support and encourage you to support as well. Meanwhile, next week this is not what we're going to do. This is what we did. I feel pretty good about the fact that I never managed to get this page quite right, either that or the page before it. At least I'm consistent. That's called steadiness in one's practice. Characteristics of one who is dear to Krishna. We will finish the chapter, verses 13 through 20. And that is all she wrote for this. All right. I see no further questions, but I see that you are all still here with me this evening. So thank you very much for sticking around. And for those of you watching or listening after the fact, thank you very much for choosing to spend your time with me. It is always a great pleasure for me to be here with you and an honor that you spend your time with me. I look forward to seeing you all next week. Until then, have a wonderful rest of your night. Kavita, you're very welcome. My pleasure. All right.